Salam alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to this Friday Reflections on this Friday, the 8th of March 2024. Jummah Mubarak, or have a blessed Friday. This is the last Friday before Ramadan, of course. So I hope we're all looking forward to the holy month of Ramadan. And I pray that this is a blessed and very successful Ramadan for all of us as a community and as individuals. May Allah bless you and your families. Um, Today, I'm going to read from this book, Irshad, The Wisdom of a Sufi Master, by Sheikh Muzaffer Ozak Al-Jerrahi, who was a Turkish sheikh. And I've randomly selected something in here, which I thought was rather intriguing. And it's actually a parable, which is a teaching story. So don't take this as exactly like the actual story itself is factual. It's a story that's told to teach something. But that doesn't mean it's not true either. It's like the wisdom in it is true, but it's told as a story, as a way of conveying that wisdom. This is something that a lot of Sufi sheikhs do. Maulana Rumi did it. Also, Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, or Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, used to tell these sort of parables or teaching stories. This one's called The King Who Badly Wanted a Son, and it's on 533 of this book. Once upon a time, there was a king who loved his queen very much indeed. In fact, they were deeply in love with each other. To the king, his wife was sweeter than a rose. Now, this queen had given birth to 5 children, all of them girls. The king was very sad about this because he needed a crown prince. He grew more anxious with every day that passed. A male heir was essential to the perpetuation of his kingdom. Who would inherit his domain if he left only daughters? Of course, this is in the olden times. Even in Britain, until very recently, only if the king had no sons could a daughter be queen with the power of a king. And we've only had a few examples of that within our history over hundreds of years of having a monarchy. Recently, they changed the law that would allow a queen, a daughter, to become a queen, even if she had brothers. But this is a very recent change. And it wouldn't have been acceptable in those days. Learning that the queen had become pregnant again, the king said to her, "You know how much I love you, but you must also realize that according to our traditions, laws, and customs, I must have a son to succeed to the throne. Up to now, all our children have been girls. Of course, we cannot complain about what our exalted Lord has given us. It is not your fault. But if the child you are carrying turns out to be another girl, I shall be obliged to take another wife in the hope that she can give me a son. I'm very sorry, but what else can I do? If I must take such a course, it will not be because I do not love you, but from my desire to secure the succession to my crown, throne, and kingdom. I only hope you will understand." The king's words were both saddening and thought-provoking to the queen. She certainly had no wish to share her husband and his love with another. She grew increasingly worried and depressed. It was painful for her to imagine another woman in her beloved husband's arms. If this new consort should produce a male child, she would gain even more honor and respect. Her son would succeed to the throne, and the first wife would lose all power and influence. She pondered these things for many days and nights, and eventually conceived a plan. If the child she was carrying should prove to be a boy, all would be well. Otherwise, she must put her plan into effect. In due course, the child was born. Unfortunately, it was yet another girl. The worst had happened, and she now found herself facing the things that she feared most. There was nothing for it but to embark on the dangerous stratagem that she had devised. She gave the midwife a bag of gold and got her to exchange the king's daughter for a baby boy, born the same day to a gypsy woman. The king was congratulated on the birth of a son. At last, he was fortunate and happy. At the royal command, celebrations and festivities were organized throughout the land for 40 days and 40 nights. When the boy was old enough to start his education, he was given a princely upbringing in the palace by highly qualified teachers. Afterwards, the king had several more sons and daughters. The prince of gypsy blood was raised in luxury. One day, when he had reached the age of 18, a hunting expedition was arranged. The king and his false son went hunting together. The prince pointed to a tree, saying, "Look, father, that tree would make good charcoal. It would also provide good material for basket weaving." The king was astonished to hear such words coming from a prince whose upbringing and education had given him no opportunity to have any knowledge of such matters. The king became thoughtful, and back at the palace, he summoned the queen. He drew her to a quiet corner out of the hearing of others and said, "There is no need." Salam alaikum, Nida. How are you? Back at the palace, the king summoned the queen and drew her aside to a quiet corner out of the hearing of others and said, "There is no need for me to repeat how much I love you. Be careful to tell me nothing but the truth. I shall pardon you so long as you keep nothing from me. But if you lie to me, I shall have you tortured until you tell the truth. This child is not mine. Now give me a full and truthful account of the whole affair." The facts had come out into the open. Through her sobs, the queen was crying. She told the king the whole story from beginning to end. When she had finished, she fell at his feet, begging his pardon and forgiveness. The king pardoned his wife, satisfied that her misdeed had been motivated by womanly sentiment and pride. But the important question was how to trace his own daughter. After thinking things over for several days and having consulted his female relatives, he finally reached a decision. He had a golden carriage built and ordered it to be set in a clearing before the city walls. Then he brought all of the gypsy girls to come and see this golden carriage. As the gypsy girls were admiring the carriage, the king summoned each of them in turn and asked them how much they thought it might be worth. Each gypsy girl in turn set a value on the golden carriage. One said it was worth a sack of gold. One said a sack of barley, while another suggested a pair of donkeys. So they had obviously no idea. Each one made an estimate according to her understanding. Then another girl was brought. Her feet were bare, and her clothes were in rags. A seriousness and dignity showed in the face of this innocent child, whose face was tanned and weathered by the cold of winter and the heat of summer. There was something elegant about her, a sedateness and a solemnity, something unusual about the way she moved and spoke. None of these things escaped the king's notice. While the other gypsy girls were giggling together cottishly, this poor lass, with her pure and innocent manner, had the air of one unhappy with her lot and bored with her life. Seeing her sad, sorrowful, and far away look, the king felt a pang of pity in his heart. This girl stood there, as timid as a dove that had fallen in with crows. They brought her before the king, who asked her how much she thought the golden carriage was worth. The poor girl was incapable of giving an answer right away, but she stood and thought for a long time, and then finally gave this reply. Sire, we live on a mountain slope. How should I know the value of a carriage like this? You will get a true evaluation if you ask the tradesmen in the market who deal in the buying and selling of gold. The king got up and went toward the girl. After giving her one careful look, he was no longer in any doubt. Convinced that this girl was his own daughter, he gave orders for her parents to be found and brought before him. His servants ran off at once and brought into his royal presence a couple claiming to be the poor girl's mother and father. Is this girl really your daughter? Asked the king. Tell me the truth. No, said the gypsies. They brought her to us the day our son was born, gave us some gold, and swapped her for our boy. The woman added, This girl never took my breast and drank not one drop of my milk. We fed her on animal milk only and raised her to this size. We cared for her as if she had been our own child. Realizing that this girl was truly his own daughter, the king hugged her to his breast, suitably rewarded the gypsies who had brought her up, distributed presents among the other gypsy girls, and led his daughter to his palace. As the gypsy boy who had passed for the prince, he sent him away from the palace with a document confirming his appointment as superintendent of forests and virgin lands. Now that the canary had entered the cage, the sparrow that had occupied it was set free to fly off into the wilds. The young gypsy was much happier with his job that he had now been given. And so everything came to its proper place, and the unfortunate girl came back to her nest after all these years. People show their true character through the things they do, the words they say, and the thoughts in their heads. The blessed prophet said, The fortunate man is he who is fortunate in his mother's womb, while the wretch is he who is wretched in his mother's womb. This noble tradition confirms the principle that character is determined from conception. So just to go over it, you're probably thinking, why have I read you a story? Especially if you're not accustomed to this method of teaching, which is often employed within Sufi tariqas. But this story is also what's known as a parable. It is a story that contains a germ of truth that is conveyed in the form of a story. The story is a way that it helps people to understand the principle. So I don't know if this story is based upon a real incident, something that really happened, and it might be, because we do hear accounts like this that are actually in history. The Prince and the Pauper, for instance, that was actually based upon a true story. Although the one that we have that's been made into Hollywood films and stuff is probably largely fictional, but it is nonetheless based upon something. But that's not the point. The point here is this story is highlighting that each of us has certain characteristics. a certain nature. And that is the real you. Many people in life will see what other people are doing and learn from them and imitate. Some of that we have to do in order to, improve our own skills, to be more successful and to develop. But if what you are doing and what you are imitating is too far from your reality, it will come across as fake and you will not be able to carry it. However, if that conveys something of the true reality of your own soul, of your own characteristic, then as you develop those skills that complement your own nature, then you'll fit right in doing what you are doing. And this is, of course, the difference between someone who is doing a job which they're comfortable in, which they enjoy, and they put their heart and soul into it. And it doesn't matter what that person does. It could be as simple as, like roof insulation, or, some of the simple tasks like that on a home, or, being an electrician or somebody who works on the gas. It could be something simple like that. And there are people who enjoy that. And if they enjoy it, they will make sure they do an excellent job because they take pride in their work. They enjoy what they're doing. Similarly, for people who could be computer engineers or people who are doctors or nurses. Some people really enjoy what they do, even if it's difficult, and they take pride in it. And that doesn't mean that they won't necessarily have bad days as well. We all do. But overall, they enjoy what they're doing. They're comfortable in the role that they have in life. But these days, there are many people who are trying to do things which it doesn't come naturally to them. And actually, they have no passion for it. And if you're doing something like that, you will struggle because every day you try to do what you're doing, and if you hate what you're doing, how can you convey it? How can you do a good job? How can you be successful at it if your mind is elsewhere and you want to be doing something else? Now, in life comes with many difficulties, and we all have to make ends meet. So all of us at some point in our life have had to do a job which we're not entirely satisfied with, just to earn some money so that we could actually, move forward, pay our bills, do whatever we needed to do. But there is something about finding the career that suits you and developing that and mastering that profession, whatever it is. And it will be different. It'll be different for every single person. Not everybody can be an engineer. Not everybody can be a scientist. Not everybody can be an imam or a priest. Not everybody can be, a gas engineer or something. Not everybody's got the knack for it. But some people are good at this job or that job, and they have a knack. And of course, they will need training, to be able to develop their skills. But they're comfortable with that. They're into that. It is an important thing that, sadly, I think, for many decades was neglected, and you ended up with people falling into jobs which they were not comfortable with. Now, this story here, that is one message which we find in the story. The boy from the gypsy heritage was not really comfortable in the role of a prince in the palace life. He wanted to do something to do with forestry and basket making. And of course, in the end, the king sent him away with an appointment to be in charge of those sorts of jobs. And he was very happy with that job. On the other hand, there was a girl brought up by the gypsies who was really a princess. And she was she was put on the earth for a different role. And other people might have just seen, oh, they're just gypsies. But there was this very talented and intelligent young lady who had been raised by them. And I dare say amongst gypsies, there are going to be many people like that, not only those that come from royal blood. This story conveys that as well. That it doesn't matter what household that you are raised in. If you have a certain character or a certain ability, you should pursue that and develop that. It may be very different even from what your parents do. But if you have a knack for it, if you have an interest, let's say you want to be a scientist in nuclear physics or in botany or genetics or something like this, and you have an interest in that, pursue it. If you're interested in technology, pursue it. Even if that's quite different from the profession of your parents. If that's your skill, just because they're your parents, whether they're your biological parents or your adopted parents, it doesn't mean that your skills are going to be the same or your interests are going to be the same as your parents. So this story kind of alludes to that as well. That a girl who was raised within a gypsy family was made for other things. And we see a lesson in this within the Holy Quran as well, because although this is a story about a king and looking for his daughter who raised a son who was really an adopted son and he didn't realize. In the Holy Quran, we're told about Musa alayhi salam, the Prophet Moses, and how Moses was raised as an Egyptian prince in the house of the Pharaoh. During those early years, anybody looking at him would have seen an Egyptian prince, a future Pharaoh, not realizing that he was of Hebrew lineage and that he was destined to be the prophet of Allah who would lead the people of Israel out of Egypt and into a new land. Who could have known during those early years? There is also the thing about the queen and about the nature of being a king. This highlights something about kingship and monarchy, which is difficult. It is something which almost no one else will have to face. But for those people who grow up as a prince and become a king, in those systems that still have traditional monarchy, they have to have a son. They have to get married and have a son. They don't have the freedom to be able to form relationships as easily as the way the people form relationships and get married necessarily to whomever they choose or fall in love with. And if their wife does not give birth to a son, it places great pressure on the relationship. And I dare say that's true even today. Although things have changed a lot, even in the past 100 years. But 100 years ago, and before that, a king that did not give birth to a son faced the very real prospect that his royal line and his legacy would end. His daughter would marry someone else, that someone else would become the king, and that someone else would be from another royal family. The power would pass into other hands. So there was very real pressure on the king, and the king and the state were intertwined, the king and the kingdom. If the king looked after his kingdom, he could be sure that he would be okay and his family would be okay. If the king was looked after by his kingdom and was a good king and took care of his kingdom, the people could be sure that they would have a bright future. But to be in that position of a king, a lot of people think of like princesses and kings, and they have lots of money, they have beautiful castles and palaces, and it's true. But we don't see the other side and how it is a gilded cage. They may well have palaces and castles, but those palaces and castles, do they really belong to the king, or do they belong to the state? In reality, of course, in most kingdoms, they belong to the state. Even if the king is in control of them while he is a king, he can't just sell them all off and do whatever he wants with them. So, and this concept of a gilded cage is quite strange for people who have never experienced anything like that, myself included, because I'm not from that kind of background. But when you think about it, you can start to see. And so the queen was under tremendous pressure. If the king had been anybody else and he had 5 daughters, so what? He doesn't need to have a king. He doesn't need to produce the next king who's going to sit on the throne. So there wouldn't have been the pressure on the queen in the same way that there is, or there wouldn't have been the same pressure on the wife as there is on this queen. And she did what she did to preserve her position and that of her daughters, but in the process, she deceived her husband, the king. Alhamdulillah, he was magnanimous in this story and he forgave her. The wives of Henry VIII, for lesser things, were not so fortunate. But the most important thing here is the last line. People show their true character through the things they do, the words they say, and the thoughts in their heads. What the Sheikh is saying here, it's not whether the person is a king or an ordinary person or a business person or a president. What matters is what's going on in their head. What are they thinking? What are they doing? And what are they saying? A person reveals themselves through their actions and through their words. And their thoughts are what leads to those. So we have to look at what we're thinking, and all of us have bad thoughts sometimes. We can do things which actually help us to reduce bad thoughts and increase positive thinking. If we try to do that, that will happen. Doesn't mean we'll never get bad thoughts, but we can reduce them. Even if we have bad thoughts, we don't necessarily have to act on those bad thoughts. If you have a bad thought or a bad intention and you do not act upon it, you actually get rewarded by Allah as a good deed, because you didn't act upon the whisperings of shaitan. And ultimately our actions, how we treat people. We cannot take anything from this world in terms of our homes, our palaces, our properties in other forms, our money, our possessions. None of that will go with us when we die. But what will go with us is our memories, and register of deeds, words, and thoughts. The angels record those, and those we will have to face on the day of reckoning. So watch what you think, watch what you say, and watch what you do. I wish you all a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of the day. Have a great weekend. And may you all have a very blessed Ramadan. Ramadan Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all.